Good morning, viewers, and welcome to our all-new minimum budget podcast show, Have You Ever Wondered? Tell me, have you ever wondered about the really important things in life? Have you ever wondered if there's a God? Have you ever wondered where time goes? What about the really important issues, like who votes for the BNP and can Boris Johnson really survive in the real world? We will answer none of these questions. We apologise, but we're students on a budget, a pretty small budget. So instead, Harvey,
Hello.
Rob, and myself, David, hello, will answer the only question we can. Our question is, how did Southampton respond to the private production of Postcards? Oh yes. Well, viewers, contain your excitement and prepare to be blown away.
Well, in 1894, the Post Office relented and accepted privately produced postcards to be delivered by the Royal Mail. Now, this may not seem like a big deal nowadays, but trust me when I say this was a big deal. Postcards went from this to this. As you can see, they were much easier on the eye. Postcards were the preferred form of communications. They were cheap, efficient, and importantly, quickly delivered. Like the rest of the UK, Southampton loved privately produced postcards. Local Southampton photographers, artists, and enthusiasts realised the potential of the postcard market and quickly started manufacturing them. This enthusiasm lasted for many years. In many respects, there is still relative enthusiasm toward the postcards today. Postcards were used for advertising purposes and socialising. That is not to say all postcards were professional. A substantial amount of surviving postcards were handmade by gluing a photograph onto a piece of card.
There was a lack of room on the postcard, however, for messages and other things like that. It kind of suggests that postcards were being used to send pictures as well as messages within the community. Indeed, it's a visual way of sharing local topical information. The majority of postcards were, and still are, professionally made. Southampton was home to various postcard manufacturers. One of the most recognised producers of postcards was F.J. Stewart.
We know that name.
Yeah.
Good boy.
Stewart designed and sold his postcards within Southampton and was something of a local celebrity. Stewart's postcards focused on a spectrum of topics, maximising local popularity. Yeah, he took pictures of everything. Streets, the docks, roads, just anything. The Bargate as well.
Oh.
Lots of people loved the Bargate.
F.J. Stewart loved the Bargate.
Yeah,
Loved it.
everyone loves the Bargate. Although Stewart sold his postcards in his son's local corner shop in Carlton Place, his postcards were made in Germany. Germany produced a better quality of postcard than we did here. Sending cards to Germany was not unusual for any postcard designer. However, the business arrangement did stop with the outbreak of World War I. Despite Stewart's local popularity, however, he was still subject to fierce competition. To protect his livelihood, Stewart focused on topical issues within Southampton.
I found that too, and I've also found that Stewart adapted his postcards so they were seasonal. For example, he'd print his postcards that come back to him, then he'd just whack a stamp on it saying Happy Birthday or Merry Christmas. I mean, he could have done this himself or some of his shop assistants or something.
Or his son who owned the shop.
Yeah, I mean, it's a quick way to sell postcards when they're in demand in seasonal periods. So this postcard on the screen is a typical style of Stewart's. It illustrates the avenue on a sunny morning. The postcard carries the message, a Merry Xmas, which has been stamped on the letter after it's been printed. This suggests that leftover stock is being used and sold within the festive periods. Demand must have been high.
Let's talk about the selling of postcards, because after all, they're a valuable commodity to make money, sold to make money.
Yeah.
Harvey mentioned F.J. Stewart, and he actually sold his postcards through his son's store. The fact that they're independent are interesting because it means that Stewart was able to rise and lower prices as he saw fit, like creating a monopoly.
And I suppose people would have to travel to F.J. Stewart's store for a certain postcard.
Yeah, of course. And the key point here is that they became a collector's item. On the bottom left of each postcard, Stewart placed an issue number. These meant that local enthusiasts were able to collect them all, making them more desirable and more collectible.
Stewart infused a new purpose to the postcard other than communication. Postcard collecting, also known as deltiology.
My favourite word now.
Yep.
Word of the day.
So that's the kids.
F.J. Stewart's postcards were not as popular outside Southampton, although he was known within the outside towns and the Hampshire district. A bit of a local legend. One main cause for this was the supply of local talent in other towns. Stuart's unique selling point was the fact he focused on Southampton and the surrounding areas, so customers really came to FGO Stuart for Southampton because they could relate to the pictures depicted.
It's important to remember, however, that as amazing as FGO Stuart was at manufacturing a postcard, he was not the only manufacturer in Southampton. Whitfield Cotter of Oxford Street in Southampton, near the old strip joint, was hired by national newspapers to produce postcards which could be given out as free gift alongside newspapers. During the initial years of postcard production, newspapers still had few pictures alongside their stories. Realising the demand in the market, newspapers decided to give incentives of free, worthwhile postcards to ensure continuing popularity. Some of these postcards were even exclusives. However, lads, it's not all happiness and sunshine. You have to remember that Cotter's methods of selling his works to big companies ran the risk of economically undermining his works, because when he sold to a big company, they'd regard it as part of their series. Unfortunately, Cotter never got the royalties back on his works.
Have either of you come across Chandler? One of my favourite photographers at the time. He was sort of the paparazzi, the sort of Sun newspaper of the time, with the postcards. He did local celebrities. He even did a freak show, and these were sold massively to publicise, advertise, and also bring awareness to local points of interest.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Some manufacturing enthusiasts decided to stay anonymous to avoid the large fame that came with production of postcards within Southampton. This postcard, depicting the unveiling of the Mayflower Memorial within Mayflower Park, was produced by an anonymous individual. This could have been because the designer did not want the pressure of local fame when producing postcards, or indeed may have thought crediting a postcard to their name was...
I know that I wouldn't want the fame that comes with creating postcards.
No.
They do say, beware the notorious postcard producer.
They do. It's gospel, that, mate. Our research shows that Southampton's average postcards consumer can be split into two categories, public and private. So private postcards were those made to order, whereas public postcards were popular cards that could be bought off the shelf. Local businesses saw postcards as a useful advertising agent from the early days of private postcard production. Businesses essentially used postcards as giant business cards. Postcards helped business information, but could also be used as a generic postcard. This meant that even when sent to the recipient, postcards advertisement could be spreading information to further audiences.
At first, Dave, the design of business postcards were relatively plain. It must be remembered, however, that the design of the postcard was down to that of the business it advertised. Here, the postcard mainly consists of hand-drawn script and pictures, alongside the company's logo. The postcard does not depict any part of the town, like public postcards would. Instead, it only advertises aspects of the services the business can offer. The vague address on the postcard also symbolises this is a card for locals, as the shop's location would be common knowledge.
With time, advertising postcards started to become more elaborate in design as well. This postcard, advertising Southampton's Royal York Hotel, depicts a still of the hotel alongside a description of hotel services on the bottom. The contrast to the previous postcard is significant and may reflect the need for creativity with business postcards as demand had grown.
And that one can also be used as a little memento after you stayed there, can't it? Of course.
We have seen postcards which have rooms circled saying I stayed there as well. That's another thing they do.
Good example from Norman.
Yeah.
I suppose it just gives the postcard a personal touch, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of history I can hold in my hand.